There are pieces of land in this country that nobody wants. Stretches of rock and scrub so worn down by time and by men that folks look right past them at the county auction and don't even bother to raise a hand. That's what they thought they were looking at the morning I walked up to the courthouse steps with 7 crumpled dollar bills in my pocket and bought 91 acres of what the auctioneer called, and I quote, useless ridge ground not fit for a goat. They laughed when I signed the paper. My own cousins laughed the hardest. My Uncle Dale laughed so loud the clerk had to ask him to step outside. And for 3 years after that, every time I drove my old pickup through the square in Logan County, West Virginia, somebody would lean out a window and holler, "How's that goat farm coming along, Wyatt?" I never answered. I just kept my hand on the wheel and kept driving up the mountain to a piece of land nobody else wanted. Because my grandfather had told me something one quiet afternoon when I was 9 years old and sitting beside him on the tailgate of his truck. He'd pointed at that ridge and said, "Boy, don't you ever let this family sell that ground. You hear me? Not for any price." I was 9. I didn't understand, but I remembered. I remembered every single word. And 3 years after I bought it for $7 at a delinquent tax sale, a man in a gray suit drove up my gravel road in a company truck with a logo on the door, and he told me something that changed everything. He told me what my grandfather had known. He told me what my family had thrown away, and he told me it was worth more money than any of them would see in 10 lifetimes put together. Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Folks all over the world find these stories, and I want to know where you're hearing this one. My name is Wyatt Carver. I was born in the back bedroom of a single-wide trailer outside Chapmanville, West Virginia, in a holler so narrow the sun didn't reach the bottom of it till near 11 in the morning. My mother died when I was 4, and I don't have any clean memories of her, only the smell of her hair, which I think was lilac, and the sound of her humming while she washed dishes. My father was killed in a mine collapse when I was 6. After that, there wasn't anywhere for me to go. My daddy's people had scattered years before, and my mama's side, the Carvers, were the only blood I had left in the world. So I went to live with my grandfather, Elias Carver, in a farmhouse he'd built with his own 2 hands on 60 acres at the foot of the ridge. That farmhouse is where I grew up, and that ridge, the 91 acres above the farmhouse, running up the mountain to where the rock broke the tree line, is what this whole story is about. My grandfather was a quiet man. He'd worked the mines himself as a young man, lost 2 fingers on his left hand to a cable, and come home one evening in 1962 and told my grandmother he wasn't going back. He farmed instead. He raised cattle, small herd, maybe 30 head at the most. He kept a garden that fed half the holler in the summer. He cut timber off the lower slope for firewood and sold a little on the side. He never had money, but he had the land. And he had a way of walking that land like he knew every rock on it by its first name. He taught me how to work. He taught me how to read the sky before a storm. He taught me how to fix a fence with hands half froze in January, and how to sit still in a deer blind for 6 hours without moving a muscle. He taught me how to pull a calf in the middle of the night and how to bury one when the pulling didn't work. And he taught me that the land remembers. That's what he always said. Wyatt, he'd tell me, the land remembers who loved it, and the land pays back whoever pays it mind. The rest of the family didn't pay it any mind at all. My Uncle Dale, my grandfather's oldest son, lived 40 miles away in Charleston and sold insurance. He came home for Christmas and for funerals, and he complained about the drive both times. My Aunt Marlene, Dale's wife, was a woman with fingernails the color of wet blood and a laugh like a broken screen door. She'd walk to the farmhouse and wrinkle her nose at the smell of wood smoke. My cousins Travis and Brandy were 3 and 5 years older than me, and they treated me like a stray dog their parents had been forced to feed. Travis once threw a rock at my head at a family reunion because I wouldn't give him the last slice of watermelon. I was 8. He was 13. My grandfather saw it, walked over slow, picked Travis up by the collar, and said, "Boy, if you ever raise your hand to this child again, I will raise mine to you, and I won't stop." Travis never did, but he hated me for it the rest of his life. My grandfather died the fall I turned 17. He'd had a stroke in the barn, and I found him leaned up against the post of the cattle gate with his hat still on. I carried him out of there myself. I didn't call anybody for 2 hours. I just sat with him in the hay, and I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. And then I called Dale. Dale drove down that night. He walked into the farmhouse, and the first thing out of his mouth wasn't a prayer or a word about his daddy. It was, "Well, guess we need to figure out what this place is worth." I was standing in the kitchen. Dale didn't even look at me when he said it. The will was read 2 weeks later at the kitchen table in the farmhouse. A lawyer from Logan by the name of Price Harlan came down in a wrinkled suit and laid out some papers. The farmhouse and the 60 lower acres, the pasture, the barn, the garden went to Dale, the truck and the tractor went to Travis. A savings account with about $11,000 in it went to Marlene for family expenses, which I later learned meant a cruise to the Bahamas. And to me, the youngest grandchild, the boy my grandfather had raised from 6 years old like his own son, the lawyer read out the following. To my grandson Wyatt Carver, I leave the 91-acre parcel known as Carver Ridge, being the upper timbered and rock portion of the home place, together with all rights, appurtenances, and minerals pertaining thereto, to have and to hold forever. Dale snorted out loud. Marlene covered her mouth to keep from laughing. Travis elbowed Brandy and whispered something I couldn't hear, but I saw her grin. "The ridge," Dale said. "Daddy left him a ridge?" He leaned back in his chair and let out a long, wheezy laugh. "Well, Wyatt, congratulations. You just inherited 91 acres of briars and rattlesnakes. I hope you know how to eat rock." I didn't say anything. I just folded the paper the lawyer handed me and put it in my shirt pocket. Here's what I didn't tell them. Here's what I never told any of them. 2 months before my grandfather died, he had driven me up to the top of the ridge in his old Ford. We sat on the tailgate. He pulled a mason jar out from behind the seat. Inside the jar was a rolled-up piece of paper and a small iron key. He handed the jar to me. "When I'm gone," he said, "they're going to fight over this place. They're going to take what's easy and leave what they think is hard. You let them. You hear me, Wyatt? You let them take it. Because the ridge is what matters. And the ridge is going to be yours." He'd reached over and tapped the jar. "This here is what your great-granddaddy left me. Nobody alive knows about it, but you and me now. You keep this jar hid. And when the time comes, you'll know what to do." I did not open that jar for almost 4 years after he died. I will tell you why in a minute. The day after the will was read, Dale informed me I had 30 days to get my things out of the farmhouse. He was going to rent it out, he said, to a family for man who'd been looking for a place. I was 17 years old. I had no parents, no money, no car, and a high school diploma I wouldn't earn for another 6 months. When I tried to ask Dale where I was supposed to go, he shrugged and said, "You got 91 acres, don't you? Go camp on it." I moved into the hayloft of my grandfather's barn. Dale hadn't thought to rent out the barn. I took a cot, a kerosene lamp, 2 blankets, my grandfather's old Winchester, and a cardboard box of books. I finished my last semester of high school walking 4 miles each way to the bus stop. I worked at a feed store in Chapmanville after school and on weekends. I ate a lot of pinto beans. I washed in the creek until the creek froze, and then I heated water on a camp stove in a bucket. I was cold for most of that first winter. I was hungry some of it, but I was on my land. And at night, lying on that cot in the hayloft with the wind, knocking the loose board on the north side, I could feel my grandfather's hand on my shoulder, as sure as if he'd been standing there. I want to tell you about the humiliation, because I don't want you to think I'm hiding any of it. I want you to know exactly what it was like. The Christmas after my grandfather died, Dale and Marlene held what they called a family dinner at the farmhouse. They did not invite me. I heard about it from a mailman who asked me if I was feeling better, because Marlene had told everybody I was down with the flu. I walked up to the farmhouse that evening. The windows were lit. I could hear Travis laughing inside. I could smell him. I stood there in the snow for about 5 minutes, and then I turned around and walked back to the barn. I sat on my cot, and I opened a can of cold beans, and I ate them with a spoon, and I did not cry. That was the night I decided something. I decided I was going to outlast them. I was going to outlast every single one of them, and I was going to do it without ever raising my voice. The following spring, Dale started asking about the ridge. He'd drive down from Charleston, sit on the porch of the farmhouse, which was now technically his porch, and wave me over when he saw me walking past. "Wyatt," he'd say, "I've been thinking, you know that ridge ain't worth nothing to you. Boy your age, you don't need 91 acres of rock. Why don't you let me take it off your hands? I'll give you $500 for it. That's more than it's worth. You can buy yourself a decent used car with that." I told him no, politely, the way my grandfather had taught me. He came back a month later. "Wyatt, I'll make 1,000. I told him no. 1,200 cash money today? No. I think that was the day Dale started to hate me, because up until then, I'd just been the nephew he didn't much care for. But the day I turned down $1,200 for land he was sure wasn't worth $200, something in his face changed. He looked at me the way a man looks at a door he can't open. And Dale Carver was not a man who liked a locked door. That fall, the property tax bill on the ridge came due. $73 and change. I didn't have it. I was 17, making $4 an hour at the feed store, and I'd spent every cent I had on a used set of tires for the pickup my grandfather had left me unofficially, meaning Travis hadn't bothered to come get it yet, because he already had 2 trucks of his own. I missed the tax deadline. Dale found out. I don't know how. Maybe the tax office called him because his name was on the adjoining parcel. Maybe he'd been checking. Either way, Dale drove down one Saturday morning, knocked on the barn door, and told me the county was going to auction the ridge off for back taxes the following month. "Last chance, Wyatt," he said. "Sign it over to me now and I'll pay the taxes. Keep it in the family." I told him I'd handle it. He smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You ain't got $73, boy. You ain't got 7. He was right about one of those 2 things. The auction was held on the courthouse steps in Logan on a cold Tuesday morning in October. There were maybe 15 people there, mostly investors from out of state looking for timber ground and hunting land. Dale showed up in a suit. Marlene came with him. Travis came too, grinning like a possum, and brought a thermos of coffee like it was a day at the fair. The auctioneer was a man named Garnet Hollis, who'd known my grandfather for 50 years. Garnet read out the parcels one at a time. When he got to the ridge, he paused. He looked up. His eyes found me in the back of the crowd. I was wearing my grandfather's old wool coat, and I had my hands in the pockets, and my fist was closed around 7 $1 bills. Garnet read the description. Parcel 17, 91 acres, unimproved ridge ground, Carver Creek District. Prior owner Wyatt E. Carver. Back taxes owed $73.16. Opening bid is the amount of taxes due. Do I hear $73? Dale raised his hand. 73. Garnet looked at me. He held my eyes. And then he did something I will be grateful for until the day I die. He said, slow and clear, "I'll take any bid over $1 on this parcel. County's just trying to recover what it can. Any bid over $1. I raised my hand. $7. The crowd laughed. Dale turned around in his seat and stared at me with his mouth open. Travis actually dropped his thermos. $7. Garnet said, "Do I hear 8? Dale stood up. I bid 73. "Son," Garnet said, and his voice was suddenly as dry as a January leaf. "The rules of this auction, which I read aloud at the start, state that bidding proceeds in dollar increments from the opening bid. The young man's bid stands. Do I hear 8? Dale's face turned the color of a boiled beet. 8, he shouted. And here is where I will tell you what I have never told another soul. I looked at Garnet Hollis, and I nodded very slightly, and Garnet Hollis, who had known my grandfather since they were boys, said the following. He said, "I'm afraid the bid at $8 was not properly raised before I called the parcel. The parcel is sold to Mr. Wyatt Carver for $7. He slammed his gavel down before Dale could draw another breath. I walked up to the clerk's table. I paid my $7. I signed the papers. Dale was shouting. Marlene was pulling on his arm. Travis was picking his thermos up off the ground. And I walked out of that courthouse with a deed in my hand and the ridge back of my name, free and clear, for less than the price of a tank of gas. That was the moment. That was the moment I want you to hold on to. Because everything that came after, The 3 years of laughing, the cousins hollering out windows, the Christmas dinners I wasn't invited to, the Sunday at the Methodist church when Aunt Marlene loudly asked the pastor to pray for young men who throw their lives away on worthless ground. All of it came out of that single morning on the courthouse steps when Dale Carver realized he had been outbid by a 17-year-old boy in a dead man's coat. And I let them laugh. For 3 years, I let them laugh, because I had not yet opened the mason jar. If this story is moving you, hit the like button and turn on the bell so you never miss another story like this one. The reason I didn't open the jar is because my grandfather had told me not to. He'd said, "When the time comes, you'll know what to do." And for 3 years after he died, I didn't feel like the time had come. I felt like a boy still. I felt like I hadn't earned the right to know yet. I kept the jar wrapped in an oilcloth in the bottom of an old ammo can, buried under the floorboards of the hayloft, and I did not touch it. What changed was a man named Calloway, Thomas Calloway. He drove up my gravel road in a white Ford F-250 with a blue and gold logo on the door, Blue Ridge Geological Survey, LLC, on a warm morning in late April, 3 years and 6 months after I bought the ridge for $7. I was 21 years old. I'd built myself a one-room cabin on a flat spot on the lower shoulder of the ridge the summer before, using timber I'd cut and milled myself from my own ground. I was sitting on the porch of that cabin drinking coffee when Calloway pulled up. He got out slow. He was maybe 60, gray-haired, wore glasses, and had the careful way of moving that geologists get from a lifetime of walking rock faces. He held up a hand. "Morning. I'm looking for the owner of this parcel. Would that be you?" "That'd be me." "Mr. Carver?" "Wyatt Carver, yes, sir." He nodded. He didn't smile exactly, but something in his face softened. "Mr. Carver, my name is Thomas Calloway. I'm a licensed geologist based out of Beckley. I was hired in 1978 by a gentleman named Wyatt Carver to perform a private subsurface survey of a 91-acre parcel in this district. I believe that would be your grandfather." I sat very still. I set my coffee cup down on the porch rail. "Yes, sir," I said. "That was my grandfather." Calloway pulled a folder out from under his arm. "Mr. Carver, I've been trying to locate the correct heir to this parcel for about 18 months. The county records were unclear after the tax sale. It took some doing. May I come up on the porch?" I told him he could. He climbed the steps. He sat in my grandfather's old rocker, which I had moved up from the farmhouse the night Dale rented it out. Calloway opened the folder on his knee. "Your grandfather hired my firm, my father's firm at the time, in the spring of 1978, to conduct a core sample survey of the upper ridge. He had reason to believe there was something under that ground. He was correct. I could not speak. I just watched him. In 1978, Mr. Carver, your grandfather spent nearly every dollar he had to pay for 12 core drillings across the 91-acre parcel. The report was completed in October that year. He paid the final invoice in cash and requested that the report be sealed and held in our firm's archive under a private retention agreement, to be released only to the verified heir of the parcel upon request. He handed me the folder. Your grandfather left specific instructions, Mr. Carver. The report was not to be volunteered to any party. It was to be delivered only if the heir came asking, or the heir could be identified and contacted after property had passed through probate. I have been trying to find you since the tax sale in 2021. When I saw your name as the current deed holder, I drove down. I opened the folder. I will tell you what was in it. The first page was a map, a hand-drawn topographical map of my ridge, with 12 red dots marking the core sample locations. The second page was a letter on old onion skin paper, typewritten, dated October 11th, 1978, signed by Calloway's father, Raymond Calloway, senior geologist. The letter read, in part, that the subsurface analysis of Carver Ridge had revealed, at an average depth of 240 feet, a continuous seam of high-grade anthracite coal estimated at between 6 and 8 feet in thickness, running the entire length of the ridge in a southwest and northeast orientation. The estimated recoverable tonnage, based on the core samples and the seam's apparent continuity, was approximately 4.2 million tons. I read that line 3 times. 4.2 million tons. But that was not the part that made me sit down. The next page was a second letter, dated 1979, also on onion skin, also from Raymond Calloway. And this one said that a follow-up survey conducted at my grandfather's request had identified, beneath the coal seam, a band of mineralized sandstone containing commercially significant concentrations of rare earth elements, specifically neodymium and dysprosium, in quantities that, and I am quoting the letter now, may represent one of the most significant rare earth deposits identified east of the Mississippi River. The letter went on to say that the deposit was, at the time of the 1979 survey, not economically recoverable due to the technology and market conditions of that era, but that its existence had been verified through 3 separate core samples and confirmed by laboratory analysis at West Virginia University. Thomas Calloway watched me read. He did not speak until I looked up. "Mr. Carver," he said quietly. In 1979, nobody wanted rare earths. The Chinese hadn't cornered the market yet, and there was no domestic demand. Your grandfather knew that. He also knew that coal mining on that ridge would destroy the surface your family had farmed for 4 generations, and he was unwilling to authorize that in his lifetime. So he sealed the report. He paid for it himself. He told nobody, and he left it for the one person he trusted to make the right decision when the time came. I felt my hands begin to shake. I set the folder down on the porch rail next to my coffee cup. "Mr. Carver, I need to tell you something else. The rare earth market today is not what it was in 1979. The United States Department of Defense has a standing procurement program for domestic rare earths. A deposit of the size described in this report, if verified by modern survey methods, would attract significant federal interest. It would also attract private investment at a scale I am reluctant to estimate without a current appraisal." "Estimate anyway," I said. My voice was steady. "I don't know how." Calloway looked at me for a long moment. "Mr. Carver, a verified rare earth deposit on a parcel this size, combined with the coal reserves, could be valued in the high 8 figures, possibly 9, depending on recoverability studies. I am telling you this as a professional courtesy. I am not making a guarantee. High 8 figures, possibly 9. I sat on that porch for a full minute without saying a word. Calloway waited. He was a man who understood the weight of silence. Finally, I said, "Mr. Calloway, I need to ask you something. Did my grandfather leave anything else with your firm?" Calloway nodded. "One sealed envelope, addressed to the heir. I brought it with me." He reached into his jacket pocket. He handed me an envelope that had, "For Wyatt," when he asked, written on the front in my grandfather's handwriting. I had not seen that handwriting in nearly 4 years. I opened the envelope that night, alone, inside the cabin, with the kerosene lamp burning. The letter said this: "Wyatt, if you are reading this, then you have done what I asked. You have kept the ridge. I knew you would. You were the only one of them who ever walked it with me for the walking of it. Your uncle walked it once in 1981 and asked me what it was worth. Your daddy, God rest him, walked it with me every week of his life. He knew. I never told him what the survey said, but he knew the land was holding something. He could feel it the way a man feels weather coming. Your mama knew too, the day she married your daddy. I took her up to the top of the ridge at sunrise, and I told her, this ground will take care of your children's children if anybody lets it. She understood me. She was a good woman. Wyatt, I wish you could have known her longer. Now, the report is real. The coal is real. The rare earths are real. I paid Raymond Calloway $4,000 in 1978 to drill those cores, which was every dollar your grandmother and I had saved for a tractor. We used the tractor we had for 6 more years, and I never told her why I'd spent the money. She never asked. That is the kind of woman she was. Here is what I want you to understand. I did not keep this secret because I wanted to be rich. I kept it because I did not want my family to become the kind of people who would tear the top off his mountain for money. I watched my own brother sell his ground in 1969 to a strip mining outfit, and I watched him drink himself to death on the proceeds inside of 6 years. Money that comes up out of the ground too fast will put a man in it just as fast. I wanted to leave this decision to the one of you who had the sense to hold the land first and think about the money second. That's you, Wyatt. I knew it when you were 9 years old, and you pointed at a red-tailed hawk and asked me if he had a family. Your cousin Travis would have asked if we could shoot it. Your uncle would have asked what it was worth. You asked if it had a family. That's how I knew. Do what you want with the ridge. Sell it if you want. Mine it if you want. Hold it if you want. But whatever you do it for a reason you can say out loud to your own children someday. And Wyatt, take care of the young ones. Your cousins are not good people, but their children might be. Your uncle is not a good man, but there may yet be good in him if he is made to face himself. I leave that to you. I trust you. I always did. Your grandfather, Elias Carver. I read that letter 9 times. I folded it. I put it back in the envelope. I put the envelope in a mason jar with the original rolled-up paper and the iron key, and I set the jar on the mantel of the cabin, and then I sat down at the table, and I put my head in my hands, and I cried for the first time since the afternoon I carried my grandfather out of the barn. The next morning, I drove into Logan, and I walked into the law office of Price Harlan, the same lawyer who had read my grandfather's will 4 years earlier. I laid the folder on his desk. Mr. Harlan was 71 years old. He put on his reading glasses. He read for about 20 minutes without saying a word. When he finished, he took off his glasses, and he looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Wyatt, son, does anyone else know about this?" "Mr. Calloway." "You, me, and a dead man." He nodded slowly. "All right. Then the first thing we're going to do is file a formal affirmation of your mineral rights with the county clerk. The second thing we're going to do is retain a current geological firm to verify the 1978 and 1979 reports. The third thing we're going to do is see a tax attorney in Charleston. And the fourth thing we're going to do is figure out how you want to handle your family." I told him I already knew how I wanted to handle my family. I told him I wanted a room, a real room, with a table big enough for everyone. Mr. Harlan smiled for the first time since I'd known him. "Son," he said, "I believe I can arrange that." 6 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon in the middle of June, I held a family meeting at the farmhouse. I had written each of them a letter and mailed it, including a certified copy to Dale, because I wanted a record that every one of them had been invited. The letter said there was a matter concerning my grandfather's estate that had recently come to light, and that I wished to discuss it with all parties present. I asked them to meet me at the farmhouse at 2 o'clock. They all came, every one of them. Dale in a golf shirt, Marlene in her church dress, Travis in a NASCAR cap, Brandy with her husband Cody, whom I had met twice in my life, and even a second cousin named Earl, who nobody had told me about, but who showed up because Marlene had called him. They sat at my grandfather's kitchen table. I stood at the end of it. Mr. Harlan sat to my right with a briefcase on the floor. Beside him, Thomas Calloway sat to my left. Dale looked at Calloway. "Who's he?" "That's Mr. Calloway." I said, "He's a geologist." Travis laughed out loud. "A geologist? You finally figured out your rocks are rocks, Wyatt." Marlene giggled. Brandy giggled. Cody looked at his phone. "Uncle Dale," I said, "I want to thank you all for coming. I've asked Mr. Harlan and Mr. Calloway here today to explain something that was hidden from this family for 47 years. When they're done explaining it, I'd like to discuss how we go forward." Dale leaned back in his chair. "Son, you got 10 minutes. I've got a tea time at 4. Mr. Harlan opened the briefcase. He slid the original 1978 report across the table. He slid the 1979 supplement after it. He slid the certified modern appraisal after that, a 43-page document dated 3 weeks earlier, signed by 2 independent geologists from a Pittsburgh firm, confirming every finding in the original reports and adding updated tonnage estimates. Dale picked up the first document. His lips moved as he read. Marlene leaned over his shoulder. Travis reached for the appraisal. Brandy pulled a 1979 supplement toward her and began reading out loud in a confused voice, stumbling over the word neodymium. I watched them. I watched my Uncle Dale read the line, about 4.2 million tons of anthracite, and I watched the color drain out his face the way water drains out a cracked bucket. I watched Marlene read the preliminary valuation and make a small sound in her throat like a woman who had been punched. I watched Travis flip to the last page of the appraisal, see the number, and drop the document on the table like it had burned his hand. The room went silent, completely silent. The only sound was the ticking of my grandfather's kitchen clock. Dale looked up at me. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He tried again. Wyatt, son, this is... How long have you... 3 months, I said. Mr. Calloway found me in April. 3 months, Dale repeated. That's right. Marlene found her voice first. Wyatt, honey, you have to understand, we are your family. Whatever is on that ridge, that belongs to all of us. Your grandfather would have wanted. My grandfather, I said quietly, paid for first survey in 1978 with every dollar he and my grandmother had saved. He sealed it. He left specific instructions that it go to the heir of the ridge. The heir of the ridge is me. I have the deed. I have the letter. I have 47 years of his handwriting. Mr. Harlan cleared his throat. For the record, Mrs. Carver, the legal disposition of the subsurface minerals follows the legal disposition of the parcel. The ridge was devised of Wyatt in the will of Elias Carver, executed in 2019, witnessed and notarized. The ridge was reconveyed to Wyatt after the 2021 tax sale, of which each of you was aware. Wyatt holds sole title to the parcel and to all rights, appurtenances, and minerals pertaining thereto. That language is in the original will. It is not ambiguous. Dale turned on Mr. Harlan. You knew about this? You've known since. I have known for 6 weeks, Mr. Carver. Wyatt engaged me in May. I would remind you that when I read your father's will 4 years ago, the ridge was described in the exact same language it is described in today. The minerals went with the parcel. They always did. Your father wrote it that way on purpose. Travis stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. This is bullcrap. This is a scam. Wyatt, you cooked this up with some geologists for a cut, didn't you? You and this old man in here. Thomas Calloway spoke for the first time. His voice was dry and calm. Mr. Carver, my firm conducted the 1978 survey. My father signed the original report. I have his field notebooks. I have his laboratory receipts from West Virginia University. I have the canceled check that your grandfather wrote to my father for $4,000, dated April 19, 1978. I have the original core samples in a climate-controlled storage unit in Beckley, West Virginia, where they have been for 47 years. Nothing about this is fabricated. If you wish, you are welcome to retain your own geologist to verify it. You will reach the same conclusion we did. Travis sat down. He sat down slow. Brandy began to cry. Not loud, just tears running down her face while she stared at the appraisal. Oh my God, she kept saying. Oh my God. Oh my God. I waited. I let them sit with it. Mr. Harlan had coached me on this. He'd said, Wyatt, when you drop a weight this heavy, give the room time to feel it. Don't fill the silence. Finally, Dale set the report down. He put both his hands flat on the kitchen table, and he looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, my uncle looked at me like I was a person. Wyatt, he said. His voice had gone thin and tired. What do you want? I'd been waiting 4 years for him to ask me that question. Uncle Dale, I said, I want to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm not asking your permission, and I'm not asking your opinion. I'm telling you, because you are my grandfather's son, and he asked me in his letter to give his people a chance. So I'm giving you one. Dale nodded. Slow. He did not speak. I am going to develop the ridge. Not for coal. The coal stays in the ground. I won't strip mine the top off my grandfather's mountain for any price. That is not what this is about. I am going to develop the rare earth deposit under a lease arrangement with a domestic processor through a federal program that Mr. Harlan has been in discussions with for 5 weeks. The extraction method is subsurface, vertical shaft, minimal surface disruption. The farmhouse and the pasture and the barn will not be touched. The upper ridge will not be clear-cut. My grandfather's mountain will look, from the road, exactly the way it looks right now, 20 years from today. Dale was nodding. He didn't know he was nodding. Second, I said, I am setting up a family trust. Not for you, Uncle Dale, for your grandchildren, for Travis's kids, if he has any, and for Brandy's kids, and for any of the next generation of Carvers who come into the world. I am setting aside a percentage of the royalties. Mr. Harlan has the documents drawn up into an educational and medical trust that any descendant of Elias Carver can draw on for college, for vocational training, or for catastrophic medical care. Not for cars, not for houses, not for vacations. For education and medicine. Those were the two things my grandfather said over and over that this family never had enough of. I'm fixing that. Permanent, irrevocable. I am the trustee. Mr. Harlan is the successor trustee. Brandy was crying harder now. Cody had put his hand on her shoulder. He was looking at me like he'd never seen me before in his life, which was probably accurate. Third, I said. I looked at Dale. The farmhouse, the 60 acres, the pasture and the barn. I know they're yours. The will gave them to you. I'm not asking for them, but I am telling you that if you ever decide to sell them, you give me first right of refusal at fair market value. Because my mother was married on that porch and my grandfather died in that barn, and those 60 acres should not leave this family. If you agree to that in writing, I will pay the property taxes on a farmhouse parcel from the trust for as long as you or your heirs hold it. You will never lose that house to taxes the way I almost lost the ridge. That is my offer. Dale's mouth was open. He closed it. He opened it again. Wyatt, he said. Son, Don't, Uncle Dale. Not yet. Let me finish. He closed his mouth. Fourth, Travis, Brandy. I looked at each of them. You both laughed at me for 3 years. You hollered at me out of truck windows. You called me a goat farmer. You came to this table 4 years ago, and you watched your father tell a 17-year-old orphan that he could go camp on a pile of rocks. You are not getting a dime out of this ridge. Not one. Not ever. Your children will. That is my grandfather's gift to them, not mine, and they will receive it on his behalf. But you too will not. You will live out your lives knowing that the inheritance you laughed at was the inheritance you refused to see. That is the consequence. I am not punishing you. I am simply declining to reward you. There is a difference. Travis was staring at the table. Brandy was still crying. Fifth, Aunt Marlene. She looked up at me. Her mascara had run. You told the pastor at the Methodist Church 3 years ago to pray for young men who throw their lives away on worthless ground. I was sitting in the back pew that Sunday. I heard you. I want you to remember that moment every time you hear about this ridge for the rest of your life. I am not asking you to apologize. I don't need one, but I want you to carry that memory. My grandfather would have wanted me to say something cruel to you right now. I'm not going to. That's the difference between him and you. He knew the land remembers. So do I. Marlene put her face in her hands. I took a breath. The kitchen clock was still ticking. Last thing, I said, Mr. Calloway is going to begin the permitting process next month. The first royalty payments, by current estimates, will arrive about 18 months from today. I will be moving out of the hayloft before then. I am going to build a house on the ridge, up above the cabin. Not a big one, a real one. I will plant a garden, and I will run a small herd of cattle the way my grandfather did. And when I have children, I will walk them up to the top of that ridge at sunrise, and I will tell them what their great-great-grandfather told their great-grandmother on the day she was married into this family. Because the land will still be there. Because I did not tear the top off of it. Because my grandfather trusted the right person, and the right person listened. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. I reached into my shirt pocket, and I pulled out a folded piece of paper. I set it on the table in front of Dale. That's a copy of the trust document, Uncle Dale. Mr. Harlan has the originals. Read it. Sign the first right of refusal on the farmhouse if you want. Don't if you don't. But read it, because my grandfather wrote something in his letter to me that I want you to know. He said, Your uncle is not a good man, but there may yet be good in him if he is made to face himself. I'm giving you the chance to face yourself. That's on you now, not on me. Dale picked up the paper. His hands were trembling. He did not open it. He just held it. And then, for the first time in my entire life, My Uncle Dale Carver, the man who had thrown me out of the farmhouse at 17, who had tried to buy my ridge for $1,200, who had laughed at me on the courthouse steps. My Uncle Dale put his face down on my grandfather's kitchen table, and he wept. He wept like a man who had been waiting to weep for 40 years. He wept for his father. He wept for the money. He wept for the nephew he had treated like a stray dog. I don't know what all he wept for. I think he did not know either. Marlene put her hand on his back. She was crying too, but quieter. Travis got up and walked out the back door and did not come back inside for an hour. Brandy came around the table and hugged me, and I let her, because my grandfather would have wanted me to, and because she was my cousin, and because the land remembers, but it also forgives if you let it. That was 5 years ago. The first royalty check came in the fall of the next year. It was larger than I expected. Mr. Harlan called me from his office and read me the number over the phone, and I had to sit down on the cabin porch for a minute. The trust is funded. It has paid for 3 Carver descendants to attend college so far, Brandy's 2 boys and Travis's daughter, who, it turns out, is a sweet and studious girl who takes after nobody in her immediate family as far as I can tell. It has paid for 1 round of chemotherapy for a distant cousin I had never met. It has paid the property taxes on the farmhouse every year. Dale signed the first right of refusal. He did not sell. Dale did something else, too. About 2 years after that afternoon at the kitchen table, he drove down from Charleston on a Saturday morning and knocked on the door of my new house on the ridge. He had a small cardboard box with him. Inside the box was my grandfather's pocket watch, which Dale had taken off the nightstand the night my grandfather died, before anybody else got to farmhouse. He had never worn it. He handed it to me on the porch, and he said, "Wyatt, this was never mine. I knew it then, and I know it now. Your grandfather meant for you to have this. I'm sorry I took it. I'm sorry I took a lot of things." I told him thank you. I invited him in for coffee. He stayed for 2 hours. He asked about the cattle. He asked if I needed any help with the fencing. I told him I'd welcome some on Saturday mornings. If he felt like driving down. He's been coming down most Saturdays for 3 years now. He and I fixed the south pasture fence together last spring. He is 68 years old. He is not the man he was. He is not entirely a new man either. But he is a man who is trying, and I think that is about as much as my grandfather would have asked of him. Travis, and I do not speak. That is Travis's choice. Brandy and I exchanged Christmas cards, and her boys have both come up to the ridge to visit. The older one is studying environmental engineering at WVU, and he has told me he wants to work in responsible rare earth extraction, which I find funny and good. Marlene passed 2 years ago. I went to the funeral. I stood in the back. Dale saw me and came over and stood beside me. He did not say anything. He did not need to. The ridge is still there. The top of it is still timbered. The hawk still nests in the oak at the northeast corner, and sometimes at sunrise I walk up to where my grandfather used to park his old Ford, and I sit on a rock, and I think about a 9-year-old boy who pointed at a red-tailed hawk and asked if it had a family. I think about my mother, who I barely remember, and who walked the top of this ridge at sunrise on the morning she was married. I think about my father, who walked it every week, and who did not live long enough to know what was under his own feet. I think about my grandfather, who paid for a survey in 1978 with every dollar he had, and then kept the secret for 41 years, not because he was afraid of being poor, but because he was afraid of being the wrong kind of rich. Last fall I got married. Her name is Hannah, and she grew up one holler over, and she laughs at the story of the $7 every time somebody new asks me to tell it. We are expecting our first child in the spring. It's a boy. We're going to name him Elias. I walked up to the top of the ridge the morning after the doctor told us. It was October. There was frost on the grass. I stood where my grandfather used to stand, and I said out loud to nobody and to him, "We did it." I don't know if the land heard me. I don't know if the land needs to hear anything. The land already knew. The land remembers who loved it. The land pays back whoever pays it mind. My grandfather told me that when I was 9 years old, and I did not understand. I understand now. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other stories on screen right now.